Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Sofia Mohamedova, or at least that's a pen name I use. I'm an ex-Muslim with a history in religious studies and an extensive knowledge of the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim texts. And I'm doing a solo video this week without Jacob, because Suit Yourself told me he would mirror this video. Jacob not being here means that the editing is going to be subpar, so if you hear a lot of me struggling to breathe, I'm sorry about that. It's my heart acting up. This video is more or less addressed to Suit Yourself and is basically an Islam for Unbelievers 101 course. So what I wanted to do is go through a bunch of the basic vocabulary and theology of Islam to simplify it for non-Muslims. As an ex-Muslim who did ghostwriting for 3 biographies of the first 3 caliphs and also did several different pamphlets on Sharia, I feel that most Muslims would at least concede that I'm somewhat qualified to make this video. The first thing I want to do is talk about the subject of taqiyya. In general, I think that non-Muslims should stop throwing the word around. Taqiyya, or lying about one's faith, was not actually mandated by Muhammad. It wasn't mentioned by him at all, as far as I can tell. From what I have seen, it was instead advocated by followers of Ali during the civil war that started the Sunni-Shia conflict. Sunnis were more powerful, so Shia had to lie about their identities to prevent themselves from being killed, which was ruled acceptable by Ali, son-in-law of Muhammad and more or less the founder of Shia Islam. Another difference between Shia and Sunni Islam is that Shia Islam rejects Abu Bakr Siddiq and his daughter Aisha as impious. Since about a third of the hadith in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, the 2 largest collections of hadith used by Sunni scholars, are narrated by Aisha, the Shia reject their collections outright and have their own 4 collections of hadith. Although there is some overlap, this means that in essence, the second most important source of Islamic doctrine is not shared between the 2 sects. I should point out here that I say the second most important source of Islamic doctrine. The first is the Quran, of course. The second is the Hadith, and the third is the Sirah, which is the biography of the Prophet Muhammad. So between these 3 things, most Islamic jurisprudence is derived. So when deriving a ruling, when making a fatwa, you consult these 3 things, and then you consult your own intelligence. And if you can't find an answer in the first 3, then you base your answer on what you think that the scholars would have said about the thing that you're ruling on. So, for example, in Iran right now, it is legal to have a sex change, and the reason for that is that they feel that Muhammad would have wanted for men who are gay to have the option to become women so that they can have sex with men, which is a very interesting position to hold, and I've gone into it before in another video on my channel. Sunni and Shia consider it acceptable to randomly throw away hadith as inauthentic. The ones seen as inauthentic have varied widely over the past 1300 years. I say 1300 because none of the collections were assembled until about 100 or so years after Muhammad's death. Just as you can look at the book of John in the Christian Bible and see how it was written about 100 years after the events that it purports to describe, and see the numerous differences with the text written just 30 years earlier, you can see an evolution of thought between the Hadith and the Quran and Sirah, or the biography of Muhammad. The Quran, as we have it today, was compiled under the reign of Uthman, the 3rd Caliph. His predecessors, Abu Bakr and Umar, didn't last very long at their posts. I should interject here with a description of what it meant to be Caliph. It wasn't just a political post, it was a spiritual post as well. It's like if you made the Pope the king of the Roman Empire as well. He wasn't the only ruler, though. He did have a panel of advisors and governors that ruled the far-flung parts of the empire semi-autonomously, and by the reign of Uthman, most of the lands that we consider Islamic today were in Muslim hands, from Morocco all the way to Pakistan. Abu Bakr's reign as caliph was mostly spent crushing apostasy internally to the lands of Muhammad, or the lands that Muhammad had taken during his life, which weren't very large. Although Muhammad had taken most of the Arabian Peninsula, if you look at it, it's mostly desert without any cities, so that wasn't as incredible as it may sound. It did make hunting down apostates and other rivals to the claim of prophet a lot more difficult, because they would disappear into the desert, and it was very hard to track them. There were others who claimed the title of prophet at that time. For example, there was this one guy named Musaylima al-Kadhib who claimed the title of prophet. He actually tried to share that title with Muhammad, and they had met to discuss their respective revelations, but Muhammad rejected him and his claim of prophethood. His followers tortured the followers of Muhammad, but the followers of Muhammad eventually managed to destroy him and his followers. As a result of Muhammad's death, the fragile alliances he had built started to fall apart. For example, to bring peace between the Medina and Meccan Muslims who had been driven from their homes, Muhammad ordered intermarriage. If someone from Mecca already had 4 wives, he was to divorce one so he could marry a man of Medina, who are called the Ansar, which literally translates to helpers in Islamic literature, and the former husband was supposed to marry an Ansari woman. After the death of Muhammad, many of the alliances that he had set up on the basis of marriage started to fall apart, especially as the parties involved died. Many people wanted to leave Islam, which according to Islamic scholars was because they believed Muhammad's death meant that he was no true prophet, but may actually have been because they had been forced to convert and weren't too keen on forcing others to convert. Abu Bakr was only caliph for 2 years, from 8th of June 632 to his death on 22nd of August 634, but in that time he managed to put down virtually all apostasy and alternative claims to prophethood. His reign was the very first time that apostasy was punishable by death. Until that time, Islam had a 30-day love-it-or-your-money-back guarantee. If someone joined Islam and decided within 30 days that it wasn't for them, then they were allowed to return to their previous religion without punishment unless they decided to also bring the locations of troops or other information that would jeopardize the safety of Muslim soldiers. So before Abu Bakr's reign as caliph, apostasy wasn't punished, only treason. After the reign of Abu Bakr, Umar was made caliph. Umar was by far the most brutal of the first 4 caliphs. He was even more brutal than Muhammad. Muhammad said that even the devil was afraid of Umar. Umar was the one who authorized Khalid bin Walid's tour de force against Palestine and the other Roman lands. Although Khalid was definitely an excellent general, the truth is that the Roman Empire was already very weak at the start of the 7th century, and that it was going to lose land and power anyway to the first empire that got an army together. So while it is true that you can say that Islam was spread by the sword, it's equally true that if it hadn't been Islam, it would have been something Egyptian, Babylonian, or Celtic. But Umar wasn't just cruel to people far away, he was cruel to those close to him. For example, a man was brought to him who had 2 women that were sisters as wives. This is how Umar handled it. Umar asked him, "Do you bear witness that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is his messenger?" The man replied, "Yes." "So you are a Muslim?" "Yes." "Do you not know that it is forbidden in Sharia for a man to have 2 sisters in his nikah, or marriage contract?" The man replied, "No, I did not know this. I, Umar, am telling you to divorce one and keep the other in your nikah." The man replied, "Islam has not benefited me." Hazrat Umar took a hold of his whip and whipped the man twice on his head and said, "You speak in front of me and say Islam has done nothing good for you. Do you not know that Islam is the only religion for all the creatures of Allah? All the trees are Muslims, all the animals are Muslims, all the creatures in the sea are Muslims, the mountains and animals praise Allah. Allah has given you faith, secure it." I just want to point out, in regards to this story, that Muslims do believe that everything is Muslim. Like the trees, the rocks, living or unliving, everything is Muslim. And so they wouldn't really have a problem with aliens from another planet because they would just say, "Oh, well, you can be Muslims too." Another time, though, a pregnant woman was walking down the street and saw Umar and immediately had a miscarriage miscarriage. He paid her blood money, which is basically financial compensation to appease the family, instead of the death of the person who had inadvertently killed their family member, for the death of her fetus from the Islamic treasury. However, Umar also used this Islamic treasury to set up a sort of welfare state. He gave stipends to new mothers for the care of their children. He bought mosques to serve not just as a place of worship, but as a kind of hostel for weary travelers, providing them with a place to sleep and with a meal. He provided for orphans and would frequent the orphanages that he founded. He also created a policy where a soldier could not be on the front lines for more than 4 months, because he wanted for them to be able to come back to their wives. And to make that a little bit easier, he also built cities near the borders of the new Islamic Empire so that the wives were not too far away from the men. However, it was his cruelness that caused his death. One of the people who had been taken as a slave during the conquest of Persia saw another slave, a child, being mistreated, and in his anger he killed Umar with a poison-coated dagger. The third caliph, Uthman, didn't expand the empire very much. This was largely due to them having already taken most of the land that could be taken without a costly, drawn-out war. That allowed him to instead focus on internal affairs, such as strengthening the position of the caliph, writing the Quran down, establishing a system of taxation for both Muslims and non-Muslims, etc. However, he was seen by many as unfairly showing favoritism towards members of his own clan, the Quraysh, which Muhammad was also a part of. This clan was one of the richest and most powerful Arab clans at the time. This favoritism led to him being assassinated. And this is where the story gets complicated. Ali, son-in-law of Muhammad, might or might not have confronted Uthman about his alleged favoritism of his own clan. After their confrontation, Uthman refused to back down or acknowledge any wrongdoing. At some point, someone who may or may not have been associated with Ali or under his orders assassinated Uthman. Following the death of Uthman, the Muslim community was split as to what should happen. Aisha, daughter of Abu Bakr and wife of Muhammad, allegedly sided with Uthman against Ali, stirring up a bit of an army to call for his death as part of the assassination attempt, which he denied, and he raised his own army to contest, and this caused a civil war. However, I would also like to point out that Fatima, the wife and ardent supporter of Ali, daughter of Muhammad by Khadijah, was about the same age as Aisha, only about 2 years younger than her. I certainly wasn't there at the time, but I would propose that this was a major source of contention between them, as they vied for Muhammad's affections, especially after Muhammad refused to allow Ali to marry Fatima at the age of 9, citing her still being a child, even though that was the age Aisha was when he consummated his marriage to her. Aisha had no children. The wives of Muhammad were not permitted to remarry after his death because he said so. Fatima, on the other hand, did have children, and she was the only child of Muhammad to have children that survived past infancy, which means that all people who claim descent from Muhammad are descended from her. As these two women reached their late 20s, I'm sure this contrast had been thrown into focus for them, causing even more friction. I would not be surprised if this personal dispute was the point of contention that caused the whole split between the Sunni and Shia. The break between the Sunni and Shia takes us all the way back around to the start of this video. The split between Sunni and Shia is far deeper than the split between Protestants and Catholics. It's more like the split between Protestants and Catholics in the 16th century. People die because of it. People are burned to death, stoned to death, and sold into slavery in the modern day because of this split, and this has allegedly been done by both sides during the past few decades. So when you see a Shia Muslim standing up against Wahhabists and Salafists, especially their figureheads in the Islamic State and Saudi Arabia, respectively, you can believe that they are sincere in their opposition. That doesn't make their version of Islam better, it's just that they're also enemies of your enemies. Hanafis, another sect of Sunni Islam mostly practiced in Pakistan, also is moderate compared to the Salafists and Wahhabists. They oppose the strict interpretations of Islam in general due to differences in which hadith they consider authentic. For example, most Hanafi sects deny the authenticity of the 70 Virgins hadith, making them less likely to encourage their followers to suicide. So although both Hanafi and Shia sects will encourage people towards their version of Islam, they're more likely to try to talk you into it than to convert you by force. While they still commit honor killings, they are less likely to kill someone from the West. So while I understand why you might see that as a distinction without a difference, to them, the differences are crucially important. Misrepresenting their positions will only cause them to just turn off the video. They won't listen to anything you have to say after that. I'd be more than happy to go over any further questions you might have. I just wrote up this 4-page thing really quick to go over many of the basics that I feel student others consistently get wrong. Feel free to mirror it if you want to. Thanks. See ya. Oh, and while I was editing this, the topic of halal came up in the comments, which reminded me that it was in the video. I wanted to say on the topic of halal, if you ask Muslims if they think that the animals are killed humanely, they will say yes, and if you ask why they think that, they'll say that the animal has been hypnotized by the recitation of the Quran so that it doesn't feel pain. That's why some imams don't feel it necessary to stun the animals. If you just say halal is inhumane, then most Muslims are going to instinctively just reject what you say. It's far more beneficial, if you actually want to reach them, to make the argument that stunning the animals causes them less pain. I think virtually all Muslims, especially in the West, would agree that causing the animal less pain is the right thing to do. That's the whole point of halal. The point of halal isn't to cause pain. The prayers are meant to soothe the animal so that it doesn't feel pain. Try to make the argument about pain instead of the word halal. Anyway, hope this video was informative and helpful, and as I said, I'm always more than happy to provide more information. Thank you.